to King Leo D&D. My name is Daniel, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about character design from a player's perspective, how to create the idea of a character. Not how to put a character specifically onto the character sheet, but how to build out and flesh out the concept and idea for a character that then can be put into the rule system. Because D&D is storytelling, because it's a role-playing game, we want to be able to create a character that has a role and a concept and a story. So to do that, for brand new starting players, I want to make sure that you can think through, who do you have in mind in your head? What sounds fun to you to play the game? And then how do we turn that into a character? Even if you are starting with a pre-made character sheet that already has a name and a class and a role, even then, there will still be some design and creation on your part. What does this character sound like? What do they choose to do in the game when given different options? All of that role-playing part, you still have some flavor and design to. So this is to help you get from your head the ideas that you have and put that into a voice, into actions, into options, what this person that you're playing does. There are plenty of videos out there or guides to tell you how to tangibly build out a character, what to write on your sheet where, what steps to use to pick a race and a class and a background, and what those give you on the character sheet. I'll talk about those parts a little bit in this video, but what I'm more interested in putting out in this is how to align your interests and goals and hopes for your experience of the game into the design of your character, and then how to make that align with the rules and the DM's expectations. The most important part of what I just said is that it aligns with your DM's expectations as well. There are plenty of opinions on this, and every table is different, which is why it's so important to say this first. Every DM is going to be running a unique game. They may want to only run classes and races straight out of the player's handbook, and may use the exact lore of the game as well. Or they might have their own world that they are integrating with different lore for races, different ways that the world interacts with different people, a different world where magic may be very illegal in certain parts of the world versus the books who may have a more open, shared experience with that too. A good example of a conflict with this in my story is that the Kalishtar race in the Wizards of the Coast lore are tied to a specific plane of existence and even have a name to this being that communicates to them via dreams. In my world, they are from the same plane of existence as everyone else, and they're associated with a particular god that communicates them rather than a lesser being. If somebody were to only read the books, create their character as a Kalishtar, and then bring that character into a game that I'm running, we're going to get into some weird space over what they've designed and what they believe their character to know and experience versus how I am going to put the world in front of them. And then if that gets weird and we're trying to sort that out in the middle of a game, that's just going to take away a lot of time and we've miscommunicated. It would have been better on my part to meet with that player in the creation stage, give them information and help them design their character that fits into my world as the dungeon master. And so with that, I want to equip you all to ask questions to your dungeon master, check in the creation process, and make sure that you two are both on the same page. With that said, let's look at where you are starting. Do you have a specific concept in mind for the type of character that you would like to play? Inspiration can be from a particular movie, book, video game, or something purely from your own imagination. And what does that character look like? What do they do well? What is a scene or concept that helps communicate what you think is vital to the image of your character? If you can summarize that concept well for your DM, they may be able to help you build that character. If your idea is, I want to play a character that can scout ahead of the party in order to warn them of the dangers ahead. I like the idea of learning that information and sharing it with my party, and that is the impact I want to have on the game. That is a great concept that a DM can help you build. We can build that character. Then the question becomes, How do we make that happen? Depending on your DM and how they are ruling, by traditional rules, you may want to pick up a wisdom-focused race, like an elf of some sort. And I'm going to do a quick aside. There is a new book that we call Tasha's, where their character creation rules are now a little more fluid, that stats are no longer tied to specific races, but can be chosen and mixed in a way that picking a particular race for their benefits doesn't really matter anymore. And so your DM might be using the traditional method where the race does matter, and in that case, this decision becomes a little more important. But if they are using the rules from Tasha's, then generally you could pick any race that you want and adjust those stats accordingly. A good question now to ask your DM in this process is, hey, are we using the traditional method, or should I be able to pick any race, and how does that work with stats? And if they look at you confused, then it's probably the traditional method, but they will be able to help guide you through that part as well. The next place to go is class. It's time to think a little deeper about your concept. Is your idea of scouting ahead more relying on sneaking, or is it on the perception part? Would you rather be a rogue in combat, focusing on good positioning and stealth to get your sneak attacks, or do you want to be looking at some sort of ranger and being an expert at reading the terrain and knowing the dangers ahead? Even a nature-based cleric can fit into this concept, but it depends on your hopes for this role. So look into the different classes that you think are close to the concept and see what abilities they have. If they feel right for you and that design seems to be heading in the right direction, go for it. Choose that class, start to build that out. Imagining your character's role and impact can help you guide the creation in the direction that you want. So if you are very unfamiliar with Dungeons & Dragons and you are just wanting to get your concept to paper, describing that concept to your DM and trusting them to guide you in the right direction might be your best move. I have found that learning D&D by asking someone who is well experienced is way easier than pining over the books alone and trying to learn it all at one time. So, at this point, maybe you've got a race by now. Either because you like that role and the implications the race has for your concept, or the story fits well in your DM's perspective and it really aligns with your concept too. You might have a class picked out from the role you want them to have in the party and the skills you want them to use. The last part is picking a background. And this can be as simple as picking something because it has the proficiencies that you want for your character, or as complex as having an important role in the upbringing and backstory of your character. Either of these directions are totally fine, and I want to address that latter one because it's a little more complex and its implications can run a little deeper. So if you're wanting to build out a full picture of your character and the job or role that they had before this campaign started, that feels important to you, this is how you're going to get that part of your character on the sheet. There are a list of player backgrounds in the player handbook, and many more have come out since then. Plus, there's also an option of making a custom background and picking from proficiencies, languages, and tools that your character would get from having those experiences. All would have to align and be approved with by your DM. So, my advice here is to imagine how your character learned the skills you want them to have that is appropriate to the starting level of your campaign. Most commonly, this is going to be at level 1. So if you want your sneaky scout character to be proficient with thief tools, maybe they were a criminal of some kind, now on the run from getting into too much trouble in a neighboring town. Maybe they're so good at knowing the wilderness and scouting ahead because they have traveled over these lands and lived as a hermit in the woods for years. Think about what your character knows how to do and how they learned to do it, and see if there's a background that fits that vision. Lastly, and this is only if your DM is up for it, they may be able to help you make a custom background if you were looking for one that doesn't quite fit into the book. An example of this I'm going to make up right now to go through that same character concept that I've been using as an example. I was raised in a hostile land, always on the run. My nomadic clan bounced from resource to resource in the environment, just trying to survive. And so were the predators that chased us. Just to stay alive, we had to keep one eye forward and another at our backs. I would give this background nature and perception proficiency. and even a language tied to the clan. Tools that would help with tanning hides, purifying natural water, and some items like a bone knife, a hammer, or other simple tools and weapons. That background is vague enough to be placed in the desert, the forest, or caves, and specific enough to speak to the types of proficiencies and lifestyle that this character might be used to. So, hopefully now you can imagine how to turn a concept of a character into a real D&D character by thinking through some key questions and communicating with your DM. Next, in brief, I just want to go over some questions to ask yourself in this process. So we've already thought through this, and now I want you to be considering elements and aspects of the character that you have in mind. So the first question, what type of character interests me for this campaign? This can be answered by looking at actions, thoughts, processes, relationships to others, whatever draws you in to playing a certain character. What is the most core value that you want to bring in to this character that you will enjoy? Next one, how do I want to interact with other players, with the people in the world, and enemies? How do you want those interactions to go? What type of role do you want to have when sitting on that side of the table? Next question is, what fighting style or role in combat do I want to have? This can help narrow down your scope for the different classes, as well as helping you create the personality around your character too. Fourth question, what is a cool scene or action that I would enjoy doing as my character? Is there a moment that you would like to play out in the future? I would love to play a character that did blank. Whatever that is, be able to talk about that, be able to express that. See if that aligns or fits into any of the classes or abilities that characters can have. Next question, is this design appropriate for the starting level of this campaign? As we think through this, and again I'm going to use the example of starting at level 1, it is often in the backstory of a new player something heroic, something epic, like my character was a king and a great fighter on the battlefield who has slayed dozens of dragons and is now adventuring off into the world. Cool, epic, awesome. That character sounds fun and compelling. It gets really awkward when you then have to start at level 1 with a character whose backstory is so heavy on their heroicism, and then you get into a fight and a rat kills you, or something like that. That feels weird. That can show up strangely in the game. And so thinking about the appropriate backstory for a level 1 character is a good move to do so that you don't run into something odd later. The next question is, does my DM approve of this concept? After you get it all out, writing it down or talking with them, do they agree with the direction that it's going? Does it feel to them like it fits and it works and the expectations are balanced? That is a crucial conversation to have. And then lastly, once you've pushed through all of these things and you've got a concept in front of you and you're reading it and you're thinking about it, do I feel like the race, class, and background allow me to act within the role I want to have in the game? If you can think through those things, imagine the character acting out, and you feel good about it, and it feels right, and it feels fun, then we've hit something good. And one of the big reasons I want to do that is because I have seen in many campaigns that I have run that I knew was going to go for a year, maybe more, a long time of playing the same character week after week. I have seen people get tired and burnt out, bored by the character that they've created because expectations were off, because they didn't think something through, because they weren't certain exactly what it would look like if they did this thing. And so if we can push all of that conversation earlier, if we can think through these things now in the idea and the concept and the creation of the character, then you are going to save yourself later from struggling on that idea. So hopefully by now you've got a good set of questions. You can think through your ideas and come up with your character. Thanks for coming by. Check out some of our other videos. Looking forward to hearing your stories down in the comments of the character that you are thinking through and what you are trying to create.